And this, believe it or not, is the original, the same synthesizer that he wrote it on. He's the only one of us in...
I am one of the most future-facing people you're ever going to meet. But I know that the reason for using AI in most creative enterprises is economic. So it's to create things either for people who don't want to spend the money on making something complex, or for people who aren't creative, to enable them to do something that appears on the surface to be creative. So my issue with AI in music is that there's a great quote from a famous architectural critic from the 18th century called John Ruskin, who said there isn't anything that can be done which can't be done cheaper and worse. He was talking about architecture at that point. AI is that. So you're not going to get anything better. You're just going to get things faster and cheaper, so that people with no knowledge will be able to create something from scratch with a vague idea of what they want. Now, this might work for things like generic backing tracks or backgrounds for TV programs, for instance, or stuff where it's not really that important how creative it is. But for writing individual songs, I have an enormous problem with it, because it means we're going to end up with a lot less individuality and more homogenized. An example of an AI that I use in my studio is I do a podcast, and we have some recordings from the past that are a little bit less than perfect, shall we say, due to various reasons. And there are some AI algorithms that you can use now that clean it up and make it sound almost perfect, which is great. So that kind of AI is great. There's another kind of AI as well, which is about enhancing your workflow. So I can see in the very near distance coming towards us a time where I'll be able to go to my studio. The AI included in my system will be able to understand what I've composed before and suggest things to me like a kind of sonic butler. What I might want if I'm in a creative block, or if I'm just going through. I'm not coming up with anything that's interesting. So that is useful. But the idea of just going, write me a song like the Beatles and something that sounds like John Lennon's voice, and it fills me full of horror. I can't imagine anything worse. In a way, make things that are simulacra of original tracks. And there are certain genres of music which lends itself to this sort of thing, like EDM, for instance. Or, can even apply to things like blues, for instance, which is a formula. But it's when you start, what you really want is things that are thinking outside the box. I mean, I used to teach MA songwriting and production for 5 years. And I was always encouraging my students to think outside what everybody else was telling them, because that kind of 5% are the ones that are going to make it. And if you just want to do something that is exactly the same as somebody else, you're fighting a much bigger swathe of people to try and be successful. So that's why I say AI is very useful for things where you just want some kind of generic background, but for real creativity, it could well end up being insanely good at some point, but we're not anything like that close to it yet. The master tapes of, say, Travelogue, for instance, from 1979, are owned by originally by Virgin, it's been passed on, and now owned by Universal, right? So they own the multi-tracks. Some of those tracks originally didn't exist in anything other than kind of 4 or 6 track form anyway. So they can take, if they wanted to, they could take the individual sounds to pump it into some kind of AI program, and those sounds could be repurposed for something. But if they do something, for instance, they take a 2-bar, 4-bar melody, then copyright law says that you'd have to pay me as the copyright owner of the actual writing file of it. They would have to pay me, but they own the original recording. So this is a vague area which hasn't really been resolved yet. No, I'm not frightened about losing anything. I mean, I'm not competing with the sort of thing that AI could create. I'm not anything massively special, but I'm always aiming to do something that's different from the mainstream or what's currently popular. So I don't really fit into that bag. AI is really designed for people who want to replicate what's currently popular. There will come a point, and maybe even here now, where you could go, you say to the AI program, can you create me a track that's an aggregation of the main points of the currently popular tracks in the top 100 singles, or top 20 most streamed songs or something. And he could come up with something which sounded kind of all right. But the indefinable thing that analytics can't replicate yet is what we would call magic or X Factor or whatever it is. It's much more subtle than pure metrics can analyze or processing. It's not just a matter of. It's a bit like watching Hollywood films where they've had various ones recently, and people who are dead, they've had them brought back to life in Star Wars or whatever. Never quite looks real, and you get into the law of diminishing returns as it gets closer and closer to what appears to be real. It costs more and more processing power, and it costs more and more time. And now, processing power is increasing all the time, so that can be fixed. But you can't program into AI randomness that makes sense, because that's what magic is. Oh, very influenced, yeah. In fact, we were going to do a tour in 1978 with supporting Talking Heads, their first headline tour in the UK. They identified us and asked us if we want, and we said, oh, we want to do something out of the ordinary. And we'd just seen the stuff that didn't go to see the show, but we'd heard about what Kraftwerk were doing and said, oh, we'll go one step further. We'll not appear on stage at all, because we had a slideshow at this time. So it was like the strap line was cinema you can dance to, right? And unfortunately, as soon as Talking Heads found out about it, they threw us off the tour. Which I thought I was a bit, or not absolutely, it wasn't the end of the world, but it just made me disappointed in them, because they were meant to be a kind of future face of avant-garde. It wouldn't have threatened them, but it would have been a talking point, And we guarantee, oh, by the way, we guarantee to be in the audience every night. so that so the fans could come and talk to us about it and what they thought. Yeah, it was at a place called Salter Lane Art College in Sheffield, and the woman who was the kind of ENT officer, they had all kind of avant-garde stuff going on. It was kind of that kind of age of the start of performance art and everything. So they loved the idea of Human League, and when we told them about it, because we never performed, of course, and we were absolutely terrified, you know, as you can imagine, because we're not really performers, you know, and so we thought we better make this look a bit more interesting. So we went to the junk shops and got some detuned TVs at the back with static on, and you know, we were friends with Cabaret Voltaire, and we'd seen some of the stuff they did. It's all kind of multimedia. So we did that, and we did the show, and we were saying, how can we recreate the sound of what we're doing? Well, we're going to have to use a backing tape of some description. So we decided to have the backing tape reel to reel on stage as one of the characters, which in fact OMD nicked that idea, and several other bands as well. And that was our first gig, and I remember coming off stage, and I was so nervous that I'd bitten the inside of my chin, and my mouth was full of blood, and I'm going, what's going on? You know, it was like, anyway, we got over that, and yeah, we went on to get more confident, you know. It's completely different. I mean, back then, when you were young, you didn't have an idea what was coming up. You know, it was like all brand new, and then of course we got to tour with like Susan the Banshees and Iggy Pop and the Stranglers and Per Uber and all these fantastic acts, and then the audiences didn't have a clue what we were. We just got gobbed on all the time, but then we stopped touring when we formed Heaven of 17. We thought we're just going to be a studio band and spend money on making great videos. So that's what we did until I think it was 98, we started touring. Yeah, we've been doing it, that's 26 years of touring now. So we still enjoy it.
No, when did we write that?
81.
1981 we wrote that.
Before you were all born.
This hat says, we don't need that fascist groove.
We all had full-time jobs when we were doing it as an artistic hobby, really. And none of us had any idea that anybody would be even slightly interested in hearing what we were doing, let alone making a career out of it. So it was only really when we created Being Boiled, which we're going to perform tonight, by the way. And it's only when we made that, and then my friend Paul Bauer, who was in a band called 2.3, was signed to an Edinburgh independent label called Fast Records. And he heard it, and he said, oh, I love it, can I send it to Bob Last, who became our manager later. And they said, oh, he wanted to put it out as a single. We thought, well, we made it, you know, that's it. That's the peak, that's the end of it, you know. Not the end, but we thought, well, this is lovely. It was in the middle of the whole punk thing where we was getting like independent singles. Amazing, this single is going to be in an independent record store in Sheffield. That was as far as our ambition went. And then, of course, John Peel picked up on it and started playing it, and before you knew it, we got signed to Virgin Records, and then, of course, that's real then. So we could give up our full-time jobs, and then it started getting real.
We bought that very synthesizer, and it's still got fucking running.
Yeah, to be honest, it was my idea because I was a massive fan of the Righteous Brothers in that period, you know, and I said, look, wouldn't it be great if we did a song that everybody knew, but recontextualize it into a total. We were fighting against this thing at the time about synths were regarded as, you know, the musicians union. We're trying to ban them, for God's sake.
You just turned it on.
Yeah, and you know, and like, oh, it's all cold and emotionless. So what? The purpose of that was to prove that you could create emotion from just a couple of synths, really, and voices. And so to try and debunk that misconception. I can see the point of it for ABBA because they're old and they don't want to perform again, and they found a way to create an experience which is incredible, you know. I'm not seeing it, but everybody I know says you've got to go and see it, and so I suppose I will have to. I love ABBA, by the way, and I'm kind of worried about being disappointed, so that's why I've not been. What's the point? If we get to, I mean, me and Glenn are in our late 60s now. If we get to, say, mid-70s and we don't want to do it anymore, would it mean sending avatars out? You know, that stuff costs a lot of money. You've got to generate a lot of income to justify the cost of doing a show like the ABBA show. And it's just, you know, so it's a cost issue as well. You know, is there an audience, enough of an audience for M17 to justify that? It's not for everyone. And the kind of 3D avatars, it's a bit of a fudge, really. They're not, I mean, people want, it's a bit like confirmation bias. People want to believe it, but it's not really for us.
Thank you, Rick Festival. What an amazing night.